What is the India story that has really kind of propelled to the points you're going to raise?
India's always been a services powerhouse, whether it's IT services, global capability centers, processing. That's always been a strength of India.
Just so looking at the growth story, would you mind diving in a bit more to kind of explain the drivers of growth, when it comes to India?
India is fascinating because unlike a lot of other places, you do have a whole range of drivers of growth, starting firstly with demographics. That's something that's often talked about in India. Now let's just put some numbers around it. In India, by the end of 2030, you're going to have about 1.5 billion people in India, of which around 80% are millennials or younger. And the median age in India is around 30 years of age in 2030. So 1.5 billion, 80% millennials and younger, median age 30. By contrast, China and the US, simply put, are going to have about 60% millennials and younger and median age 40, thereabouts. I'm simplifying it. 1.5 billion people, 80% millennials and younger is 1.2 billion people. 3 times the population of the United States. Just to put those numbers in context. Over the 10 years to 2030, if you do the numbers, consumption is going to grow by about 4 times as a result of that. So you've got demographics, you've got consumption, you've got a rising middle class, you've got urbanization, greater consumption of goods and services, greater financial services penetration. So that's a whole demographic story. I think the other very interesting angle is digitalization. And what's interesting is India is now exporting that digital model, the whole range of pillars in what is called the India stack. So you've got UPI, which is the Unified Payments Interface. You've got the so-called Aadhaar card, which is an identification document. So everybody has that. You've got people who were unbanked before given bank accounts with zero balances, which means that benefits can go to them directly. And now you've got people who were previously unbanked, previously not having any bank balances, with access to financial services, with balances in their accounts. So a huge number of digital initiatives, which means that productivity is higher, access to financial instruments is higher, people can bank, people can borrow, people can save. So that whole digitalization story is very powerful. E-commerce, obviously a key driver of that. So that's digitalization. We talked a bit about deglobalization. That's a key driver. So manufacturing is coming into India. And what's fascinating about the manufacturing is that it's across a whole range of areas: green energy, semiconductors, electronics, and so on. And the other interesting thing about the globalization story, when you put it together with digitalization, we talk a lot about AI in our business. We talk a lot about AI disruption to traditional businesses. When you look around the world and you look at who benefits from that, India is a clear beneficiary because you've got a deep pool of talent, you've got relatively low-cost labor, and you've got a very technologically savvy labor force. So as jobs are displaced from traditional businesses, traditional industries, particularly in the West over time, I think India would be a real key beneficiary of the digital workplace that we expect to see over the next 5-10 years. There's a range of other things that drive the growth story, but I think those are the key ones. And when you put that all together in combination, together with manufacturing, together with the flows that are coming in, it's a very attractive story.
Any risks to think about? I mean, I know with any investment decisions, you look at the other side as well to kind of counterbalance your thesis.
Yeah, there's always going to be risks. I think we talked a bit about valuations. Whilst there is merit for the valuations, when there is a catalyst for markets to reassess growth, when a new event forces people to recalibrate risk, and we've seen it over the last few years, whether it's COVID, whether it's geopolitics, and so on. We never know when those things are going to happen. Obviously, valuations in India will mean that there will likely be a correction and volatility. But I think when you look at the long term and people look at the growth story for the next 5-10 years, that growth story is not going to change. So I think that's a likely source of short-term volatility, but possibly not a long-term risk. Geopolitics are always an issue in the Indian subcontinent and in Asia. I think that can be managed. So I would say those are the key risks for India.
And just from a political standpoint, we're coming into a pretty significant election cycle globally as well, also in India. Are those risks coming in, you think you could think about, or do you think it's all well priced in?
Sure.
In the market?
Well, the current leadership is popular and is getting more popular. India is a very diverse, complex socioeconomic system, political system, cultural construct even. And you need a strong leader in India to take things forward. And Prime Minister Modi has demonstrated that he has been able to do that. Living standards are improving, incomes are improving, people can see their lives improve. I think he will be re-elected comfortably, which means you have stability and which means a lot of these reforms will continue.